Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Decryption and I hope you are well. Throughout 2023 we've been building up this racing game using the Synty racing pack, and we're about to hit 2024, so I've decided we're going to move to a new pack for future tutorials. So I figured in this tutorial it would be a fantastic way to create the ultimate starter project. Throughout this tutorial I'm going to show you how to create the brand new solution, import the Synty assets, import the plugins we need, setting up all the little bits we need, set up some interactions, some basic dialogue, some basic quests and other bits like that, all in one nice package tutorial. So let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create my new project. So you can either do this from the Unreal starting screen or you can enter a project and go File, New Project. So I'm going to come and make it a third-person game this time. And I'm just going to come in and set the project to be YouTube Tutorials V3. I'm going to keep it as a blueprint project. My target's going to be desktop and the quality is going to be maximum. And I'm just going to tap create. So now when the project creates, you can basically click play and you've got an initial starter project right there and then. All well and good. So the pack I'm actually going to be moving to is the Elven Realm pack here. It's basically a Skyrim, Lord of the Rings, Witcher kind of thing. Think of it like that. And we're going to move our pack and start using this one because I think it's got a lot of opportunity for us to play around and do some cool stuff. So the first thing you need to do is download the asset pack. So you can see here I've downloaded all the Unreal ones and the source and the icon. And you'll see it says we've got Unreal 4.25. That's okay, don't worry about it. So we're going to extract this so we've got all the asset files we need. The way people tell you to move new assets into yours is to open up the project, migrate it and then stick it where you want. There's a much easier way. If you just copy the folder and move it into the exact same place, it will also do the same thing. So in this case, it's at root of content. So if I come into my Unreal, right click and do show in file manager, you can see I've got my project content and I'll paste in here. Now I will say there is a caveat to this. This works because I know the Synty asset packs are all self-contained within that single folder. If you had something in this folder, in this folder, in this folder, then it starts to get more tricky and the migrations might be the better way. For just importing Synty's asset packs or in general most asset packs, if they're self-contained it will work. Don't move it into a new folder like you really want to because it will break all the references. But you'll now see if we come into here, we have the Project Elven pack here. Now before I open it, I'm instantly going to come and create a new folder called Asset Packs. Because if I import a bunch of assets, I don't want them all at root, I'm going to tidy them away. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually move this into the Asset Packs folder. And this could take a while, so we'll just give it time. And once it's done, it should be all moved successfully. Now there very well may be instances where the folder remains here, but it's also here. So the first thing to do in that step is to go into the folder and then take a look if there's anything actually remaining. If the folder's completely empty, it could very well be a redirector issue. So just come up to the filters at the top here, go down to other filters and make sure show redirectors are ticked on. Now in Unreal, assets link to assets link to assets. They all link to each other when they use it. For example, this material, this blueprint has static meshes, it has materials, it has a bunch of things connected to it. If you move the source files to this asset needs to know where those assets were. So it creates a redirector, which basically says, oh, you're looking for this asset, it is now over here. They can be quite tedious and can break projects, so it's often quite good if you are moving things around to fix them. Otherwise, if you've got show redirectors ticked and you've gone through every folder, there's nothing there, you can just delete the folder, you'll probably be safe. So now that we've got this, we can come and load up this demo here. And this will compile the shaders for the first time, which is completely fine, but it will take some time. And once you've got it up, here we go. So you might have a different asset pack to me, you very well might not have, but this is the asset pack I'm using and you can see it's absolutely huge, it looks absolutely fantastic. We can even get down into it and just briefly travel around. So it looks all good. But at the start I showed you, and I don't know why Synty does this, but a lot of their packs are made in Unreal 4, not 5 yet. And we're not fully taking advantage of Unreal 5's nature, such as Nanite, Lumen, stuff like that, on this map. Now you can go around and tick all these options, but there's an easier way so you don't have to investigate all those attributes. So I'm just going to make sure the project is fully saved, so you can see down the bottom it's all saved. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to come and copy everything inside here, all the actors. So if I close them down so we can see how many we've got. So I'm going to hold the Control or Command key and then close all the children down. Then I'm going to press it again to open everything back up so every child is open. Now I'm going to press Ctrl A to select everything and then Ctrl C to copy absolutely every single actor in the level. I'll hit Ctrl N to open a new map and then click on Open World so it comes with lighting, world partition already set up. Once it loads, I'm going to click at the very top of the outliner and press Ctrl V to paste. This may take a while as the pack I'm using is quite large. If you get any crashes doing this, just copy them in smaller chunks, it'll work the exact same. Once it's done, you should have everything ready. So you can see the landscape is currently taking over the map. I want to keep this for later use, so I'm just going to find it and drag it down so it's out of the way. Now I'm going to hit Ctrl S to start saving and I'm going to create a folder called Maps. Then I'm going to name this map Level 01. Next I want to enable Nanite on every mesh we can. So I'm going to go into the models folder and filter on static mesh. I'm going to press Ctrl A to select everything and then I'm going to right click Nanite, enable Nanite. Again, this might take a while, so if it crashes, just run it in batches. Once it's done, you can now go to Lit, Nanite Visualization, Triangles to see Nanite in action. And now with all that done, we have our land. You'll notice it's very, very bright compared to the demo map, and that's just because we've got multiple lights at the moment. So if I come and find our light and lightings folder, so the lighting is our Unreal 5 based one, and the light here is our Synty based one. So I'm just going to basically go through and disable the Synty based one and see how the map looks. So you can see it's better, but it's very dark in some aspects. So I'm basically going to go through and delete what we've got duplicates of and keep everything else. So the skylight and the exponential height fog we already have, so I can get rid of those because they don't make a difference. And I'm going to toggle them on and off and actually see if we see a difference. So the atmospheric fog changes something very, very minorly in the windows, and you can see little aspects. So I'm going to drag that into the lighting folder so we know that's good. The directional light does add a big difference to the mountains and such, and it's in the right place. So I'm going to go and disable the directional light that we added. So I'm going to come and copy the Synty location and rotation and paste it onto the new one, just to set the scene. There we go. So if I disable this other one now, we can copy the intensity, and I'm basically just going to copy all the main details over that we need with it disabled, just to make it work how we want. But because it's going to have other settings that we don't need to worry about, we're just going to make sure we only do the little bits we need to. And then once I've done, I can delete it. Then I'm going to come and enable the light source again, and you'll see it pretty much resolves most of the issues. And now we have a very nice looking scene. So I'm going to also enable the post-processing volume, because you see it gives it that little Synty glow, but I am going to come and tune it down because personally I'm not a fan of the amount it glows. So I'm going to come into the bloom, and I'm just probably going to half it. There we go. That's a lot nicer. I've just halved it, and I'm going to drag that into lighting as well. And now that we've done that, we can just delete off the light here, and I'm going to make sure everything's back enabled again, and I can Control and S. So the final thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move most of this into its own folder so we know it's backed away. So I'm just going to click on the background, and I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom and click the vehicles. I'm not going to click the world partitions because we want to keep them separate, and I'm also going to untick the player start because we want that outside, and the two landscape stuff as well. And I think for me that's good enough, so I'm just going to come and click the new folder icon. There we are. So I'm going to come and name this new folder Polygon Elven. I can Control Shift and S to save. So now that we have everything set up, we can grab the player start, and I can just move it roughly to my location. So I'm just going to right click it, and I'm going to do snap object to view. There we are. So now I can just position this pretty much wherever I want it to go. So in my case, I think I'll just put it on this port. You can put it absolutely anywhere you want. And I'm just going to set the rotation so it's all up straight. Now if we click play, we should start off here and be able to explore the world. So you can see now I can successfully run around the level as the mannequin. I can come on to most ports, I can see the ships. I can't yet get up to the big bridges and stuff, but that's something we can fix in time with teleportation and stuff. We've got the magical clock things. There are a few collision issues which we can fix eventually, like this house here is a bit bugged. But from running around, this is really the only place I've found that's so bugged. But everything else is completely fine. We can wander on up the stairs. And you can see when we come down here, we can access the portal, which at the moment doesn't do anything. And the reason I'm talking about the portals is if you look, that there are multiple stages of levels to this map. So you have the first initial flat land. You have this one over here you can't get to. You've got this one up here, which you can't get to at all unless you come from that portal. So I'm thinking we'll just tie that portal to that portal, so you go and it teleports you straight up, like elven magic stuff. You can come around here, you can explore this area a bit more. You can come around to this portal, and I've not actually found where the other portal comes out yet. But we need another portal up here, so you can start accessing this area, and then that's the only one you need. You can get up successfully and visit the rest of the Elven Palace. So that'll be a good game balancing thing. You start off down here is what I'm thinking. You do a few quests. You unlock access past some, I don't know, some guards or something to this portal, or it's constructed, I don't know. That takes you to the second level. You can do some more bits and bobs, and then you take the third portal and it somehow takes you up here. But that's the plan. So now that we have the basic Synty set up, all I'm going to do is make some minor tweaks for our benefit. So I'm going to go to Edit, Project Settings. And in Maps and Modes, I'm just going to come and set the maps here that we want. So when the editor first starts up, the map that we want is this level 01 we created. So I'm just going to tap that there. And then when the game starts, what map do we want? And at the moment, I am just going to tick level 1 as well. So that means when we first load the editor up, or when we first come into the game, it will instantly go to level 1, which is good because then it means we can start playing. And now we move on to the next portion of the tutorial. We're going to look at what plugins we need to import. Now, I've already got a very brief plan for what we want to do with the game. I've not got a story or anything yet, but at least for the tutorial series. And I'm going to want 3 plugins installed, which I know are a must really for my project. The first plugin is, if you've watched any video on my channel at all, is going to be the Narrative 3 Quest and Dialogue system. It's one of my favourite plugins I use. The only caveat with this individual plugin is it is a paid plugin, but I promise you it is absolutely worth it. You don't get many plugins with 5 stars with this many reviews. And it's not sponsored either, which is even better because that proves I personally like it that much. Is the Async Loading Screen. We need some decent loading screens and startup movies when we start the game. I think this is the perfect way for us to go for it. The final plugin I'm going to install in this tutorial is the ALS system, the Advanced Locomotion System. This is basically a plugin that gives you some fantastic movement right out of the box. You've got climbing, running, jumping, crouching, walking, ragdoll. You've got all sorts of stuff. Now, there's 2 versions of this system because the Advanced Locomotion System in Epic is all fully built in Blueprints. It's 100% Blueprints, but it's a bit outdated now. For example, it doesn't use the enhanced input system Unreal 5 is pushing. And there's a few other little tweaks about it, like it's not replicated, so you can't use it for multiplayer, which just boasts its own issues, but we can import it and fix the input systems if we're doing a single player game. If you have no desire to ever touch C++ even through a guide, I'd recommend going this one and fixing the Blueprints input systems. It's very well documented, there's plenty of tutorials for it. However, me personally for my project, I'm actually going to go with this ALS community version. Now this is a mix between Blueprints and C++, but it boasts a lot more functionality and it's more updated. So you can see this was updated last month, whereas the other one was updated I think over a few years ago now. You can spawn a lot more NPCs, it's very well optimized, it's replicated, and it's updated for the latest versions of Unreal. So I'm actually going to use this version here, but you can use either version you wish, you just need to import it into the project. So I'm just going to come up to code at the top and I'm just going to download as a zip file. Then I'm simply going to copy this folder inside my plugins folder. Then if you're using the C++ version, you just need to come to your U project, right click and choose generate VS Code files. I'm running on Linux and I've not yet found how to add that option, so I'm just going to run the command line to run it. And with that command successfully run, you can load Unreal up. If the command fails for any reason or the option doesn't do anything, just load Unreal up and see what the error is. It'll generally try to tell you what the issue is. So you can see nothing's really changed, but if I control space in order to open my content drawer, I can go to my plugins folder. If you can't see plugins, make sure you go to settings at the top here and just tick plugin content. I'm going to go into my Advanced Locomotion System community content, V4, and then in levels you will see I have my demo level here. Once you open it up and the shaders compile, you can click play. And you see we now have C++ community version of ALS in. We can walk around, we've got really nice movement, we can press the X key to ragdoll, we can press space to get back up, it all looks really nice. You can press tab to show you debug, which shows you everything you want to do, like slow motion. You can enable debug view, trace mode, anything else you want. And just as another test, you can hold Q to change what version you want. So most games would probably have you at default. You can change it to injured, so you're walking around a bit hurt, hands tied, you've been kidnapped. You've got your rifle, pistol, double pistol, two-handed pistol, you've got your bow, and you've got so much more you can do with it. And you can add your own options, customize it. The world is your oyster with this one. You can see we have a lot of NPCs all running around, performing actions. We can carry our barrel over here, we can ragdoll to get rid of it and pick the barrel back up for some reason. And then we've also got a mantle system, meaning we can jump up here and climb up just like so. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen, there is our ALS system now plug in and set up. So let's move it to our actual level. So what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to quickly show you three little bits in here you need to be aware of. The first is if you come to world settings, we have this game mode here. A game mode pretty much tells your level how to work, what's its pawn, what's its controller, what HUD class do you have, and all of the bits like this. You can see the ALS system has its own game mode, its own pawn, and its own controller. So because we're replacing our entire character with this, and we've not really done anything with our character, I don't see any reason why we can't just use this game mode instead. So I'm going to come back over to our new level here, and then I'm going to come over to my world settings, and where we have the game mode, you can see we currently have none. So when you've got none, Unreal will just try to guess what you need to add in. So I'm going to come and change this to our ALS game mode SP. And now if I'm in the game, we should have the ALS character in the game. So there we go, we now have our ALS character in the game. We should be able to run up and mantle onto things. There we go, how cool is that? We should be able to jump off and ragdoll, just to make it look really cool. And we can now pretty much get places we didn't manage to get before, because we can mantle up there. So there we go, so I've climbed to the top of this tower here. We can have a nice little look around all of our beautiful sky and map. Great, so we have the ALS system in. So just to give you some more info for the ALS system before we move on to the next step. Your main character is actually ALS character BP. That inherits from a C++ file, but we can make any blueprint modifications we want in here. So to find this, if you just open up the plugins folder, community content, locomotive system, blueprints, character logic, and we have it here. We also have our player controller here, which is where we'll do any of our input and bits like that. That's how we'll set narrative up. And they're the two main ones you'll need to remember. So I'm actually going to come to this character logic folder here, and I'm going to right click it, and I'm going to do add to favorites. And all this is going to do is right at the top under favorites, it's pinned it for us so we can get back to it anytime we want, making it a lot easier. So if we jump into the ALS character blueprint here, you can see we have this character here. Everything on this character is set up so the hands work to grab things and everything like that, and that's all on this mesh here. Now the next step for our system is to actually change the character blueprint so it looks like our actual Synty NPCs, because otherwise this chap's going to look a bit weird in our map. I'm going to come over to my asset pack, which is the Elven pack, and inside models characters, we have all the different characters that we actually can use. And of course you can import it from any pack as well. So in this case, I think I'm going to use this basic male soldier just for now. And we'll just say he's a low-ranking soldier, and then we can eventually add more packs and stuff. So we need to start retargeting this character blueprint to that one. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come and create a retargeter for these Synty packs. So under content, I'm just going to come and create a folder called animations. And inside here, I'm going to create one for my Polygon Elven pack. And this is where I'm going to create my retargeter. So I'm simply going to right click, animation, retargeting, IK rig. I'm going to call it IK rig underscore Polygon Elven. So I know exactly what it is. When you open it up, it's going to ask you for a preview skeleton mesh. So I'm just going to come in here and type in Polygon Elven again. And it will give us all the skeletal meshes it can use. So I'm just going to find the soldier. There we are. So there's our Polygon Elven chap there. So what this IK rig is going to do is basically tell Unreal some specific named points down the bones here, so when we compare it to another IK rig, Unreal can do all the magic in between to link all the bones together correctly. Now the Synty ones are normally pretty basic, so I'm just going to come and click add new chain, and my first one will be root, and I'll click add chain, and then I'm going to add another chain of head, then I'm going to do arm underscore L for left arm, then I'm going to do arm underscore R, leg underscore L, and finally leg underscore R. And then the last one I'm going to do is spine. And there we go. So next we need to now map the start bones to the end bones for this. So for the root, I'm just going to say my root is my root, like so. If we run into issues later, we can change this to pelvis, but we'll start with root for now. The head is going to be starting from the neck, and it's going to go up to the head. The arm left is going to be upper arm L, and it'll go to the hand L. And there's a specific reason I'm not selecting the clavicle, because it's a bit in a weird place compared to Mixamo and such. The arm R is going to be the upper arm R to the hand R. The legs are going to be thigh L down to foot L. The leg right is going to be thigh R down to foot R. And finally the spine is going to be from spine 001 all the way down to spine 003. And then finally I'm going to come up to my root up here. I'm going to right click and choose set retarget root. And I can control and save. And that's our IK rig done for our Synty character. You can add more, so eventually we'll probably add some specific hand ones, so his thumb, his finger, and his turtle's fingers can move. And then if you ever add facial rigging, you can do eyebrows and all sorts. Basically, any of these bones down here, if you can use them, you can probably go for it. Now, the next step is to create an IK rig for the ALS character here. Now, there are multiple different ways people talk about how to do this with the ALS one, but the two main tutorials, I found a really short one that's not the most efficient, but it does work for getting up and started, and then a longer one which takes some more in-depth time, but you have a really performant, efficient rigged character. So the most common one I see that a lot of people use is this style one here. This particular tutorial is by Kitta, so I'll put a link in the description. And this one, as you can see, is 4 minutes long, and all you basically do is create a rig for the ALS character and then make your metahuman on top of him and hide the ALS character and map their bones together. So as his hand moves, the metahuman's hand will follow it. So you're basically rendering two characters in a sense, playing two animations. So that's why it's a little bit inefficient, but it's really, really quick to do. The next tutorial, which is the longer one, is by Native Coder here, and it seems to be the one the vast majority of people prefer, but as you can see it's 20 minutes long, it takes a lot longer, but this takes you through rebinding every single animation so your character can use them all, and then applying it so you only have one character running at once. For this short tutorial, I am just going to run through the tutorial for Kittis, and then in the future, when I've got more time, I'm going to go through and do it properly there. Links in the description for everything. So the long story short of this one, of the shorter version, is he provides a predefined IK rig, so we can go and download that via code download. And once you've downloaded it, you'll see you've got this IKR ALS asset. So I'm just going to copy this and take it into my tutorials, and we'll do content, animations, and I'll create a new folder inside here called ALS, and I'll just paste it inside here like so. And if everything's gone well, when you open it back up, you should see you have an ALS character all predefined with all the correct bones and everything linked up like so. So the next thing we can now do, now that we've got these two, is we can actually bind them together. So I'm going to go into my Polygon Elven folder, and this is the way I prefer to work personally. You can work any way you want. I like to add my IK rigs into their own folders, and the IK retargeters to the folders where you're pulling the animations into. So for example, I want the animations to work for the Elven character, so I'm going to put the retargeter inside the ALS character. The retargeter, compared to the IK rig tells Unreal this is how the bones work. The IK retargeter is all the jumble in the middle where you say this IK rig and this IK rig, here's how they communicate. So I'm going to go into animation, retargeting IK retargeter, and I'm going to call it IKR for IK retargeter. I'm going to call it ALS _2 _ Polygon Elven, and then I'm going to open this up. In the source here, we can say what's your source IK rig asset, and we know it's going to be the ALS character. So you can see in this viewport here, we now have in there, and then the IK target is going to be my Polygon Elven pipe there. So you can see it's asking that the target bone we've selected has a root bone that's on the floor. Do we want to apply a vertical offset? I'm just going to say no. If it looks weird or your character's now floating, just press Ctrl Z and then go back and click apply vertical offset and see if it fixes it. So now that we've selected the two assets, I'm going to come over to chain mapping here, and I'm going to map all these up to the correct ones. So root will become root here. My spine will be spine. Head will be head. Arm L will be my left arm. Arm R will be my right arm. Right leg, and finally left leg. And now if you come over to the asset browser, you should be able to find an animation and click it. So I'm just going to come and click walk F for walk forwards. So you can see there's a few issues with it, such as the offsets happening the arms aren't right, but he is trying to crouch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to my ALS source here, and I'm going to click the root and just see where it is. So you can see the retargeted root on the rechain is here on the pelvis. So I'm just going to come back to my Synty character, and I'm going to right click the pelvis, and I'm going to set that as the retarget root like so. So it's in the middle now. So you can see now that's brought him down, so they're in the correct level, which is a good start. The legs do look okay actually, but the arms are messed up, so we need to correct that. But to fix the arms, we need to change our target Synty character so it's the A pose instead of the T pose. So I'm just going to come up to the default pose up here, and I'm going to click the 3 dots and click Edit Retarget Pose. And now I'm going to come down into my upper arm L here, and I'm just basically going to rotate this so it's roughly in the same direction. So I'm going to say about 40. Yeah, I think 40 is okay. Then I'm going to click the lower arm, and I'm actually going to rotate it forwards a little bit by, say, 20. There we go. Yeah, I think that's okay. So I'm going to come back over to the right side, and I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to rotate it down by 40, and I'm going to rotate the lower arm forwards by 20. There we go. So now if I Control S and come down and pick a pose now, you can see the arms are now correctly following it. So you can see we now have a basic character walking. You can add so many more bones to it, but like I say, this is just a basic version of it. When you get into your hands and stuff, you'll definitely want to come back to it. So now it's time to actually apply this new rig to our new character. So I'm going to jump into my ALS character blueprint, and I know I'm going to be making all my modifications here, so I'm happy to change it. Under mesh here, I'm actually going to come and add another skeletal mesh, like so, and I'll call this body. Inside here, I want to go and select my actual polygon elven soldier. So I'm going to click my male soldier, and you can see it's added there, so it's looking okay so far. And now we need a way to basically tell this Synty guy to copy the animations of the ALS character. So I'm going to compile this, and I'm going to come over back into my animations folder, into my polygon elven, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to do animation blueprint. It'll ask us which character we want to create it for, and I'm going to put my polygon elven knight male because that's the actual skeleton. So I'm going to click create, and I'm going to call this AB Synty polygon elven _2 ALS. So just so it can copy it across. And I'll open this up. So the first thing optimization wise we're going to do here is normally people will drag off this try get pawn owner and they will cast it. There's a reason I'm not going to do this now. I'm going to show you a new technique I saw. I can't remember what YouTube video I saw it on. But if we now come to this animation blueprint here and go to size map, you can see this already, even though we've done nothing, is 54 meg in size. So that's how much it's going to hold up in memory. And that's because we've casted to this character, and that's created a hard reference to the animation character BP, and that means it's loading in memory every single thing this character has to offer, which is quite a lot, as you can imagine. If I come and delete this off and just complete it again, I can close the size map off, and I can come and recreate it here, and it's gone down to 54 kilobytes. It's literally gone down by 50 megs of RAM that it'll need, which is something we really need to take advantage of. So what I'm going to actually do instead here, instead of casting to it, I'm actually going to create my own interface to do this. So I'm going to come into my content folder here and go right click blueprints, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to create a new folder again inside here called interfaces, and I'm going to go blueprint interface here, and I'm going to call this BPI character, just like that. And I'm going to open it up. So the key behind this interface here is anytime we try to cast to this character and do something on it, unless we absolutely must cast to it for some reason, we're going to lock it behind an interface. So the interface will act as a gate between it. Because of an interface, you don't need to cast to it, meaning all that memory won't be used. So in this character here, what we need to do is we actually need to get this base mesh here, the parent, and say follow this. So I'm just going to rename my function to get ALS body, just like that. And then on the outputs, I'm going to make it return a skeletal mesh. So I'll call it mesh. And I'm going to set it to the type of skeletal mesh component. I'm going to compile and save. Now if I come back to my ALS character, and I'm going to go to class settings, and on implemented interfaces, I'm going to add BPI character, and you'll see it's now added it here, so I can compile and save. And if I go to the event graph, you'll see inside this interfaces we now have our get ALS body. So I'm simply going to double click it, and inside here I'm just going to connect my mesh up to it like so, and I'm going to hit compile and save, and that's all we need to do. So just a reminder, in here if we drag off this and do cast to ALS character blueprint, compile save, every time you use a cast, it creates a hard reference. So if I right click this and do size map, you can see it's 60 meg now because I've added the interface. So if I get rid of this and drag off of this and simply instead do get ALS body without casting to it, if I just drag off from here and does implement interface, add a branch, connect it up. So does it have this interface? Our interface is our BPI character. If it does, then I'm going to drag off from here and do get ALS body and connect it to the true. And now if we compile and save, it's doing the exact same thing. But if I right click this now and do size map, you can see it's 75 kilobytes. It's absolutely tiny. So that's why we need to try to avoid casting the best we can. You can't always do it. Sometimes you absolutely need to do it. But other times, just try to add it to an interface if you can. And now with this get ALS body, we can just promote this to a variable. And now I can jump over to the anim graph, and I can drag in my parent mesh here, and I can drag off and do retarget pose from mesh, and I can connect this to the result. So I'm going to click this retarget pose from mesh, and then for my retargeter asset, I'm going to select my ALS to polygon Elven like so. Now I can compile and save. And now I can come back to my ALS character BP, and in the viewport I can click my Synty character and I can apply this animation blueprint. And there you go, you can see it is now following it, not identically, like the hands aren't there because the IK bones don't allow it, but it's breathing and it will run just like it. The final thing we want to do is we actually want to get rid of the ALS character. We need to keep him there so we can follow the animations, but we need to get rid of some bits. So I'm going to come and set the visibility to unticked, and you'll notice now that I've compiled, it's stopped animating. So by default, on Unreal, when something is invisible, it stops everything. The animations won't work, the checks won't work. It's exactly how you'd want it to normally be. And this is another reason this method is quick, but it's a bit dirty, is we actually need to tell it to overwrite that and still run your animations. So I'm going to come to visibility based anim, and I'm going to always tick pose and refresh bones. And if we compile and save, you'll see even though the ALS character is invisible, the mesh will still work on the body. The only other thing I'm going to do for this Synty character now is I'm going to scroll down to collision, and I'm going to make sure it's just set to no collision. We don't want this to collide at all. All the collisions will happen with the mesh and the capsule component. And if we jump into our game, in theory, we should now be able to run around as a Synty character with all the animations of ALS. It might be a bit glitchy in places, which is where the retarget animation tutorial will be a better version, but for quickly getting it into your game, this is a fantastic way. And now you can see our character is here. We can run around, we have the footprint sounds, it all animates. We can either go to the menu and, put a bow and arrow on the character and he can use it like so. So you can see if I can get the angle right, basically the hand isn't perfect, but it's good enough for a very quick start of a game so you can start prototyping. It's been like 20-30 minutes and we've got a character fully animated, ragdolling, gets up, and then you've got all your different ones. You can use a torch, you can use binoculars, and it's a good start. One thing we're going to look at now is previously when we enabled Nanite, we've applied it to everything. If I open the output log here, you can see we're getting a lot of warnings here. So I'm just going to copy this top one and paste it into the search log. And you can see we've got a lot of these things here erroring a lot. So we need to resolve these, and they're really, really easy to fix. So what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to come and select this static mesh here. And it basically means Nanite's not going to work on meshes with opaque or masked blend modes. It's not supported currently. So what I'm going to do is come to my asset pack, and I'm actually just going to filter for this one here. And I'll get rid of this, and I'll just search for _glass and a type of static mesh. So you see all these ones here don't support it. So I'm going to click on them all, and I'm going to right click and do Nanite disable. Because it's only 63 meshes and it's glass. You're not gonna save a huge amount. And that's done all of those. So I can Control S that again. So I'm gonna dock this at the bottom here, and I'm gonna right click and I'm just gonna do clear log. So I'm just gonna play the game, and we're gonna see if we can try any more of these warnings to pop up. And basically what we're doing is making the errors pop up, resolving them, and then coming back again. There we go. So we've had a few already, which is good news. So I can stop it running, and now I can come and filter on these. So we've got anything with water in it, so we can come and filter on _water. So we've got a few bits here, so I'm going to disable Nanite on these. We've got a magic well, so I'm going to select both of these and just disable them. We've got the Aurora meshes at the top, so that's the rainbow effects up there. They're trying to Nanite them, and it's not going to work. And the final one I've got is the sky dome that this map is currently using. So I'll just disable Nanite on that as well. Now this is very specific to this pack, but if you import an asset pack, typically you will tend to get spammed with those errors. So if you do, it's relatively easy to fix. And you'll see nothing's really changed. If you do enable Nanite visualization, which is lit Nanite triangles, you will be able to scroll around and you'll see the odd thing, which is just completely black, like that ship there, this waterfall up there, and that just basically means Nanite's not taking effect, but I'm not too worried because the majority of everything else is. So now that we've got our player set up and we can walk around happily, let's now add just an NPC there that we'll be able to use later for some quests. So let's say I'm going to add an NPC just up here. It could be like a shopkeeper or something. So we already know that ALS has NPCs because we saw them walking around in the demo. So I'm just going to open up my content drawer and go back to my character logic, and you'll see we have this AI folder here. And we have this ALS AI BP. Now this is basically a copy of the main character, but it's got a very subtle difference, is that it's set up to just work with the ALS AI controller. So I'm just going to apply the same changes we did on our character to this one here. So because I want my changes for my character again, I'm actually just going to come up to my blueprints folder here, and I'm going to right click and create a new folder, and I'm going to call this. Inside here, I'm actually going to duplicate the ALS character BP into this NPCs folder here. And that's going to be our ALS NPC. And now I can open this up. The only other changes we need to make to this to stop it being a player is if we search for possess, we want it to be disabled. The auto possess AI, we want to set to placed in world or spawned. And then finally, if you search for controller, it needs to be the ALS AI controller there. And if you click it, it should take you into this character logic one. So if we compile and save, if we can now drop this NPC into our world like so. So we just drop in there, rotate him around a little bit. And then just to differentiate it, I'm actually just going to come and change his mesh. So I'll come down and click the body, and I'm just going to change it to, a scholar male, just like that. We could also add on hair and stuff, but we'll do that another day. So that's our NPC setup. If we play it now, we can see we can walk up and the NPC is just stood there. Perfect. So he's going to look at us as we walk around. That makes it look a little bit cool. If we walk far away, I believe he's going to keep looking at us, which is fine. We can sort that another day. But yeah, so we now have a basic NPC. So this is where we move on to the next part of the tutorial, where we're going to look at dialogue. So we can go up and talk to this happy chap here, interact with him. So we need some type of interaction ability to be able to talk to him. Now there are a couple of ways you can do this. One common method is to just add a box collision in front of him. When you walk up it says press E to talk. However, I'm not a fan of that because it means you can walk up backwards and you can talk to him as well. So the way I'm going to do it is I'm actually going to shoot out a line in front of my player, directly in front there, and if it touches an NPC, then we know it's an interactable thing we can talk to. And this will work for anything we want, whether it's pickups, coins, anything like that. And it's really easy to do. So just like we created an interface to tell it when it's our character blueprint here, I'm actually going to create another one specifically for interactables. So I'm going to come back to my interface here and I'm going to right click blueprint and we'll call it interactable, and I'll open this up. So the first function I'm going to add is can interact, and this is going to have an output which is a type of boolean saying interactable, and this function is going to be used when we walk up to someone to say can this be interacted with currently. So for example, in dialogue, if somebody walks in front of you but you're already in dialogue, then the can interact should be false. We shouldn't be able to pick it up. Or if we've got an inventory system and you go to pick an item up, the can interact will probably be false because you can't pick it up. The next function I'm going to add is get interact text. And this is going to be the text that shows on screen when you try to interact with something. So it might be press E to talk to the shopkeeper or something like that. And my output will simply be the text, and it'll be a type of text. So it's translatable. The final function we're going to add is interact. And this is the actual function that runs when it interacts with the element. So for the item, it will be pick it up. For the NPC, it will be talk to if you can. And now we can come across to our ALS NPC because they're interactable. We don't want it on the player because they're not interactable. and I'm going to go to class settings, and under implemented interfaces, with keeping the character one on there because we are using that, but I am also going to add the interactable blueprint interface we've just added like so. So now we've got a way to interact with the NPC, and because it's an interface we can tell if it's interactable. We don't need to cast to it, so that's even better. We now need a way to tell our player to fire that line cast and detect if it's the character or not. So in order to do this, inside our player controller is where I'm going to do it. The reason I'm doing it inside the player controller is if you're ever on a horse or you're in a car or something, you might want to still reuse it. If we stick it on the character here, you can only ever use that one character, that's it. If you want to use it on something else, you have to duplicate it. So if I ever change characters, or if I have like a game where you switch between two characters, or in like The Witcher 3, you temporarily switch to another character, the player controller means it's all in one location, you don't need to duplicate it. So inside here, I'm just going to create a new event graph called Interact. Then I'm going to add a custom event here called Interact Line Trace. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable called canInteract, and I'm going to add it in here, and I'm going to add a branch to it. So if this canInteract is true, then we can go off and we can render the line to interact. So outside of dialogue and stuff, this will be true. But if you're in dialogue, then it'll be set to false, so you can't interact with anything anymore. So I'm going to hit compile, and just going to default this to true and compile again. So now we actually need to calculate where we want to fire the line trace from. So on this character here, I know I'm probably going to be better firing it pretty much where this arrow is, which is in the center of the character. So luckily, we've already got an interface for this. So I'm going to right click and I do get player pawn. If you're on multiplayer, you'll need to find a way to get this based on the player index, which I don't have yet. And then from here, the interface we've already created, I can just do get ALS body. The ALS body and the Synty body are in the same place, so we can get the body. Next, I actually need to get the capsule here in order to get the half height in the center of it. So we don't have a way to do that currently. Now, normally we could go off and cast, but that's even worse because we're going to be running this inside event tick. So I'm just going to come back over to my BPI character interface, and I'm going to create a new function called get capsule half height. And I'm going to make it return a float. So I'm going to set the output to be half height, and it will be a type of float here. And I can compile and save. Now if I jump back into my character BP, into the event graph, you can see I have a new interface called get capsule half height. So I can drag my capsule component in, I can drag off and do get half height, and I can connect this in here. And I can compile and save. And now back in the player controller, I can drag off the player pawn, and I can again use the get capsule half height. And then from this mesh here, I'm just going to get my world location. So we're going to calculate using this, get the world location of the pawn, which is going to be roughly, here, but it'll be at the floor because that's where the root is. And then using some logic, we can move it up by the capsule half height. So from this return value, I'm just going to do a plus, and then I'm going to right click this bottom vector and do split struct pin. I'm going to drag the half height into the Z axis, so we're moving it up to the half height. And then this is our start point. So from this get capsule half height, I'm going to drag off, and I'm actually going to do a box trace for objects like that. Now you might be wondering why I'm not doing a line trace, and a line trace is good, but if you're ever so slightly off looking at the character by a pixel almost, it won't let you do it. You have to be looking directly at the character. And it's okay, but it doesn't feel right. Whereas if I do a box, then we have more radius to actually try and get it right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this start into the start like so. Now we need to get an end. So where does the box actually end? So from this start location, I'm going to drag down and do a plus, and then I'm going to connect this to the end. So this is where we can actually tell it how far it needs to go. So from this get player pawn, I'm going to drag down, and I'm going to do get actor rotation. And then from here, I'm going to drag off and do get forward vector. So if our character rotates around, this is what's going to control it so it only ever faces forwards. And then from here, I'm going to multiply, and I'll say, I don't know, we'll right click and change it to a float, and I'm going to change it to say 200. And then I'm going to connect this to the end, and that'll connect it up like so. Next, we need to set the half size, which is the radius of the box that it's going to check. So just as a test, I'm going to set it to 20, 20, 20. The orientation, I'm going to connect up to the get actor orientation like so. And I'm just going to neaten up my lines a little bit like so. I'm going to set the draw debug type to 1 frame so we can always see it, and then once we know it's right, we're going to turn it off. The actors to ignore, I'm going to drag down and I'm going to do make array. And in here, I'm just going to get my player pawn and connect it into it, because we don't want it to hit the player pawn, which is itself, and then say, hey, you're interactable, because that's just going to cause, it's not going to be great. And then finally, I'm going to take the object types, drag it down here, and yet again, I'm going to do make array. And this time it wants to know what type of objects we actually want this line trace to hit. So the first one is going to be pawns, because we want it to hit pawns in the world. And the second one, I'm going to set it to world dynamic, so anything that we spawn in. If you've got other options, you can add it all into here, that's all fine. Now that we've done this, we just need to actually call this function here. So I'm going to go back to my event graph, and I'm going to add my event tick in here, and I'm going to drag in the interact line trace. The reason we're doing it this way is if we have other event graphs later, we don't want to be having multiple event ticks running. It's a bit messy, so we just keep it in one location. So the event graph will go out and tell every other function it needs to run. So now if we try it, we should see a box rendered in front of us, and that's where the interactable radius will be. So here we are. So we now have a box. So that's our interactable box there. So anything that hits this box will be interacted with. So if I walk up to this character here, you see it should go green because we're interacting with it like so. There we are. You see if I turn around, the character will eventually move because I'm not looking at them, but as I turn towards them, you'll see it interacts with them, and that's absolutely perfect because that's where we want to be interacting. And this means now that if you really want to not interact with them, you have to properly look away from them, and it's a lot better. But you can feel free to change this however you want. So now that we have our interact code actually telling us when it's hit something, we now actually need to use it and tell it what we want to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a branch to return value. So if it hits something, if it doesn't get anything, we can just ignore it. We don't really want to do anything. However, if it does hit something, then we actually want to start using it. So I'm going to drag out from this out here, and I'm actually going to break it. And this is the object that we've hit, and it's going to tell us everything we need, including the actor that was hit. So from this hit actor, I'm going to drag off and I'm going to do does implement interface, and I'm going to check if it's got our interactable interface. So is this object actually interactable? If it is, I'm going to add a branch to it and connect it up like so. If it's not, then we don't need to worry about anything for now. However, if it is, now we can drag from this hit actor again, and I'm going to do can interact, and I'm going to send it the message saying, can we interact with it? If we can, then we can go on and we can run the interact code. If we can't, then we can come down and we can call false again. We don't need to do anything. So finally, after we've confirmed if it's a type of pawn and that we can actually interact with it and it's available for interaction, now we can actually store this pawn or this actor in a variable so we can use it later. So I'm going to take this hit actor and I'm actually going to promote it to a variable over here, and I'm going to call it looked at interactable of type of actor. Baseline, it's not loading anything else except the pure actor details, and I can set this into the true here. And then from this, I can do the get interact text, and then just for now, because I haven't got a UI, I'm just going to come off and I'll just do print text, and I'll connect it in like so, like that. So at the moment it'll print up at the top screen saying interact with shopkeeper or something like that. And then the only other thing we need to do is we need to clear out this looked at interactable if we can't interact with it. So I'm just going to come down here underneath my event, and I'm going to create an add custom event, and I will call it clear interactable. And all this will do is take the looked at interactable and just set it to none. And then eventually, when we add the UI, it will also to be the hide on-screen controls. But for now, we can come up and we can say, if it's not hit anything, then we can clear the interactable. If it's not got the implement interface we need, we can clear it. And also if it's not currently interactable, then we can clear it off like so. That's it. The only other thing we actually need to do is to actually add our interactable click button, so we can actually press a button to interact. But before we do, I'm just going to comment all of this, and I'm going to add the interaction line trace comment, interaction clear, and now we can add key here. Again, I'm adding the key into the player controller because I want all my different pawns to be able to run it. If you only want one specific character to ever run it, say for example, you never want to use it in a car or on a horse or with a different character, just stick it on the specific blueprint. So now we actually need to find where we store the input. So this will be in your advanced locomotion system. We have the input here, and we have debug and default. So we know we want to go into default, and we've got a bunch of different stuff here. So I'm just going to copy jump action. and I'm going to rename it to IA_interact. Then I'm going to jump back out and I'm going to go into the IMC default, and you can see we've got all the other ones here. So I'm going to add a new one. I'm going to set it to our IA interact, and inside here, this is where you bind your keys. So for me, I'm going to use the E key, and then I'll just say on consoles and stuff, you can use left face add button, which will probably be square or something like that. And now back in our player controller, now that we've added that, we can type in our interact event, and it'll give us our IA interact, which is telling us when we press the interact key. And then just on started here, I'm going to drag in our looked at interactable, and I'm going to right click and choose convert to validated get. And I'm going to plug this into started, and I'm going to collapse this down. And this will basically say if it's valid that we've got something and they press the interact key, then we can use it. So from the looked at interactable, I'm going to call our interface and just say interact. So interact with it. If it's false, we're just going to ignore the command. We're not going to do anything with it. The only other thing we would do here is clear the on-screen interact message because we've now finished interacting with it, but we're all good for now. So now if I come back to our ALS NPC, we now need to start implementing these interfaces we've added, specifically for the interaction ones. So the can interact, for the moment I'm just going to tick it because we've not really got any logic, so can they interact with it? Yes. The interact text, I will drag off, and thinking about NPCs, the only thing you can interact with them, apart from if you're stealing from them, which will go down another day or something, is to just talk to them. So on the NPCs, just temporarily, I'm going to add a variable called name. I'll set it to a type of text, and I'll drag it into the scene. From this text here, I'll drag off and do format, and then we will say talk to, and then I'll curly brace and put name and drag the name in. So now this will format it to say talk to name. Compile. And then the final one we can do is the interact here, which is where we will begin the dialogue. So just for now, we'll drag off and just say hello. And now we can compile and save. So now before we try it, let's just give him a name. So I'm going to find his name property, and let's think of an elvish name, Bob. Here's the confusing thing, and I've wasted 6 hours trying to solve this now, and I haven't got anywhere. Because if we can run up and press it, it just keeps saying talk to Bob. No matter what we do, input I cannot get working on the player controller. It's the correct place to put it. But 6 hours later, I've tried everything I can think. It's possessed by input. It's auto-receiving input. It's using the correct input. I've tried recreating their own mapping context. I've tried using the existing ones. Something in this player controller will not let keys be pressed. 6 hours! And I cannot solve it. I do not know at the moment why this is happening. I've planned to fully explore it and figure it out. However, it does mean at the moment we're going to have to put another workaround into it, which is not good because I don't like doing that, but that's the way we're going to have to do it. So, if we just take this bit here where we interact, get the look at interactable and call interact on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this interact event here, and I'm going to add a custom event called try interact. And I'm going to connect it to this. Then I'm going to go back to my character and paste it in here. From here, I'm going to right click and do get player controller. And then we just need to get an interface that will call the try interact. And then we call it from started. It's a horrible workaround and I don't like it. But it's the only way I can get it to work for now. When I fix it, I will pin a comment in. I will try to get it out there. But I don't know what it is at the moment. I believe it's something in the C++ or something I'm missing. But if you know, let me know below. So I'm going to come to my player controller, and I'm actually going to go to my interfaces folder, and I'm going to create a new interface just for the player controller, for anything we do put in there. So I'll go to Blueprint, Interface, and I'll call it BPI Player Controller. Inside, I will add a function called try interact, and that's all it'll do. I'll just hit compile. Now I'll come back to my player controller, class settings, and under implemented interfaces, I'll just add our BPI player controller. And then I will come and double tap try interact, which will add it here, and then I can cut it and paste it in this one and then connect it up. Get rid of that one, like so. Finally, I can come back to our ALS character, just drag up from here and do try interact, which will call the interface, and I can connect it to the started, and then that should be it. Now we should be able to interact with them. It's a small workaround, it's not fantastic, there's no real performance issues with it, but it's just not great. So now here's the part where we can start implementing narrative into it. So I'm going to come into my blueprints folder here, and I'm going to create a new folder inside here just called narrative. Inside here, I'm going to create a dialog folder, And while I'm here, I'll just create a quest folder for later. And then inside here, I'm actually going to create a new folder called abstract. And the reason I'm going to do this is I always like to start my narrative implementations off with a master quest and a master dialogue. So if we want to make bulk changes down the line, it's already pre-set up. So I'm going to come to narrative, dialogue, and I'm just going to call it db master dialogue. And then I'm also going to do this for the quest folder, just so later we're all set up. So I'll create a new folder called abstract. And inside here, I'll create a new narrative quest, and I'll call it QB master quest. And then I can come to edit, project settings, can scroll all the way down to the bottom, and I can go narrative dialogues editor, and I can set my default dialogue to my master dialogue. And then I can come to quests, and I can do the exact same thing to the master quest. So this just means now every time we create a new dialogue, it will automatically use that as its parent. So I can come to my dialogues folder, I can right click, I can do narrative, and I can do dialogue, I can do db std bob. So this is going to be a dialogue blueprint, which is a standard dialogue, meaning it takes over the camera. It's not like a bark where you walk up in passing, and it's for Bob. So I'm going to open this up. I'm going to go to class defaults, and I'm going to set the speaker's name to be Bob. And I will click my node and set it back to Bob. And I'm going to get rid of the hi there, I'm Bob. I don't need it. And from here, I'll just drag down, add a line for Bob saying, hi there, someone stole from me last night while I was sleeping. Can you please go and find the stolen goods? From here, I'll give the player two options. I will find your goods, which will start the quest. And then the other one will come off and say, I can't right now. If your player says I can't right now, then I'll just add a line for Bob, which will just say something like, oh, okay, no worries. If he says he'll find your stolen goods, then Bob can reply, oh, thank the heavens, I will reward you handsomely. Perfect. So there's our dialogue. So now let's actually plug it into Bob. So I'm going to go back to my ALS NPC, and pretty much every NPC in my game, I want to either have some dialogue or have a bark or something very similar. So I'm just going to come down to the variables down here, and I'm going to create a new variable called dialogue. And I'm going to search for narratives dialogue here, and I'm just going to set it to a type of dialogue class reference like so. And I'm going to make it instance editable. And then on interact, instead of printing hello, I'm going to drag down the dialogue here, and I'm going to drag off and say, is a valid class? Is it a class actually being assigned? If it hasn't, then we're just going to ignore it because we don't need to interact with them. But if it has, then I'm going to right click and I'm going to do get narrative component. And then from here, I'm just going to drag off and do begin dialogue. And we can connect that to the true there. And I can connect the dialogue up to here. There we are, just like that. And I can compile and save. Now, we've actually skipped a step at the moment because we've entirely skipped the whole narrative setup part and gone straight into using it. So let's take a step back, and I'm going to go to my player controller, and I'm going to add the narrative component here on the player controller. And then we need an event begin play, which we don't have yet. So I'm going to go back to my event graph, and I'm going to right click event begin play. And then just to make sure it's not missing anything, I'm going to add a call to the parent function, because otherwise we might miss some stuff off the ALS character. And then finally, I'm going to drag in my narrative component here, and then from the exec, I will do a create widget. The class will be the narrative default UI, and the narrative component will be plugged in like so. Now I can drag off from this. I'm going to promote it to a variable because it is very, very advised to do it, so you can turn it off or control it later. And I will call this narrative UI. So this is the instance of the UI. And then from here, I will just add to viewport like so. I'll select all of this and just do narrative setup. Then the only other thing I'm going to do is I want to rename what the player's name is. I will do get game mode, then I'll drag off and do change name like so, and I'll plug it in. So it wants a controller, which I could just drag off and do self because we're already inside a controller. And then it wants the new name, so for me, I will just set it to player like so. And I'll tick name change so it alerts everything that's replicated that we've changed the name. And that's the narrative setup. Now we can hit compile and save. And in theory, if we now come back here and click on Bob, we can give him the dialogue we created for him, which will be our STD Bob. And now we should be able to try it. So now if I come up, I can talk to him. And if I press E, our dialogue, as you can see, breakpoints. And hey there, someone stole from me last night while I was sleeping. Please can you go and find the stolen goods, please? I will say, I will find your goods. Oh, thank the heavens, I will reward you handsomely. There we go. We can now interact with Bob. Fantastic. So to do a little bit of cleanup, back on our player controller, where we run the interactable debug thing, I'm happy with this, so I can turn this off. I don't want it active anymore. And so I don't want it to spam loads and loads and loads. So all I'm going to do is come and set the duration to something like 0.1. So it's really, really quick. It's on the screen just for a little. And that's all I'm going to do. So now we can actually get on with making our basic quest. So as I've described in the dialogue, somebody stole something from him. We need to go and find it. So I'll just have him like travel around and, you know, find an item here, find an item here, you know, 3 stolen items or something. It'll say return back to him and then it'll go back. And it's that simple, really. So yeah, so the first thing we need is we're going to need a basic item we can pick up. So I'm going to come into my blueprints here and I'm going to create a new folder called items. Inside here, I'm going to create another folder called abstract. And inside here, I'm finally going to create a blueprint class. It'll be a type of actor and I'll call it BPI pickup item. And I'm going to open this up. Inside here, the first thing I'm going to do is come to the class settings and I'm actually going to open advanced and click abstract. All this abstract thing does is basically mean you can only inherit from this, you can't use it. So if I drag this out, you see, it won't let me drag it into the world. To create something from it, I need to right click it and do create child blueprint, or come into the items, right click blueprint class, and then I can search for it. I don't know why I call it BPI, it's normally BPA for BP abstract. But now I can right click blueprint class and call it BPA pickup item. And I'll call this item underscore stolen goods. And you can see I can drag this one into the world like so. So on this BPA pickup item, I'm going to add some default things that I know all the items will use. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a box collision. Now, this is based on a tweet I saw a while ago that the developer was saying everybody keeps using sphere colliders for all their collision when you don't really need to, because a box collider will do the exact same job. So you can imagine if this sphere collider is split up, you've got so many different points it has to collide on and calculate based on the roundedness and stuff of it, whereas a box just does the odd side, so it's a lot more efficient. It's minuscule, and it's, unless you do it throughout your entire game, you're probably not going to notice anything, but it's a nice little thing that we can do. And I'm just going to expand it up a little bit like so, and that'll be the collision trigger point that collects the item, so I will call it trigger. I will come down and I'll make sure it only overlaps pawn, so overlap only pawn, and then I will add a on component begin overlap. So the first thing we need to do from this other actor is we actually need to check if the other actor that's picking it up is the player. In order to tell this, normally we cast to it, so we go cast ALS character blueprint, but as we've discussed in this tutorial previously, that's going to tie this item to the player all the time. We don't want that. So all I'm going to do from here, just so we don't have to cast to it, is I'm going to say equals equals, and then the equals passing one in will just be get player pawn. So all this is going to do is check if the current actor that's hit it is the player pawn. If it is, then we can carry on, and it's not tying it together because there's no hard references, so even better. From here, I can now do right-click get narrative component, which is our narrative quest thing, and I'm going to complete a narrative data task, and I'm going to do it this way this time. Because normally I would just add it to the inventory and check the inventory, but I haven't added the inventory system yet and it's a bit out of scope for this tutorial. So I'm just going to go with a basic data task, and every time it completes, I know I've picked it up. And then in future tutorials, I will probably come back to here, delete this bit and add in the inventory. But for now, for a starting point, it's very good. I will promote the argument to a variable and I will just call it item narrative name, and I'll make sure it's instance editable. And now we need to create a data task for it. So I'm just going to come into my narrative folder. I'm going to right click, add a new folder called data tasks. And inside here, I will create a new narrative data task called DT item pickup. I can open it up and I can just give it a nicer name and stuff like so. So I can save that. I can jump back to my item pickup and now I can add the item pickup. And then another thing I'm going to do just for future proofing it, I'm actually going to add an event dispatcher now called on picked up. And I will make sure it has a input named item, which is going to be a type of BPA pickup item. And then I'm going to actually drag this out and call it. So the reason I'm doing this now is in the future, if we ever need to look after a specific item, or we need to make sure the item isn't collected by the enemy or something, we've already got it built in. It's nice and useful to have, and it doesn't really do anything if you don't use it. And then finally, I will just drag off and call destroy to get rid of the item. There we go. The only other thing I'm going to do is I would like my items to rotate, so I'm going to come and add a rotating movement component, and then I'll just compile it and save just like that. So now that we have this pickup item done, I can come back to my items folder and edit the stolen goods. And all I'm going to do is just add a static mesh inside here. You might ask, why didn't we add a static mesh inside the blueprint, the pickup item? And it's because some items you might want to pick up a gun, which is a skeletal mesh, or, you know, something like that. So it's not always super easy just use static meshes. It's more reusable if you just add it per object. And for the static mesh, you need to find something to use. We've got some elixirs. That's absolutely perfect then. So I'll just stick a random elixir on here. There we go. And that's now the collection radius for it. I'm going to edit the class defaults and I'll set the narrative item name to elixir02. And then for the static mesh, I'll just make sure I turn off all collision because we don't want it. And then I'll also come down and search for nav. And I'll just make sure it can't affect navigation because we don't want people avoiding it just because of that. So now if I drag my item into the world, we should be able to run up to it and pick it up. So drag the elixir in and you'll see it's, even though it's on the floor, everything's going through the middle of it. I don't like that. So what I'm going to do is come back to my BPA pickup item and I'm actually just going to grab the cube and move it up more. So it's sitting on the floor, just because then it's more in the middle. And then I'm going to grab my stolen goods and I'm also going to move that up so it's out of the floor as well. And now with that, you'll see as it's sitting on the floor, it's slightly floating, which looks better. Testing. Okay. So now you can see the item, not that one, this one is spinning successfully. If I run up and collect it, boom, it disappears. We got rid of it. How cool is that? So we now have a really basic item as well. So now, just for ease sake, I'm going to place these items around random locations. So I'll place this stolen goods item here. I will place one here. And then finally, I will go all the way over to this side. And I will place a stolen item here if we can get here. Hopefully we can, like so. There we go. So now it's time to make our quest. So if I jump into my narrative quests folder, here we go. I'm going to rename that folder. So I've just renamed this folder to abstract. And it popped up with an error saying that certain things are using it, so it's had to create a redirector. So what a redirector is in Unreal's terms is it doesn't go through and instantly update every location if you move something. I don't know why, it just doesn't. So it creates these redirector files here. Now they can be quite a pain when you're using source control and stuff, so it's a good idea to get rid of them. And they're really easy to do. So if you want to see the redirectors, because a lot of people won't know they're there, click your filters up here, other filters, and click show redirectors and just make sure it's ticked here. It won't break anything, but you'll just see a folder there with nothing in it. All you have to do is come to it, right click and do fix up. You don't want to keep it, you just want to fix up. And then it'll fix it like that. So now I can come and delete this off and delete it. I don't know why it does it automatically. Maybe there's a setting to do it automatically. To me, just like Unity, when you moved it, it was moved for good. But Unreal's clever, it's probably got its reasons. So now I can right click in my quests and I can do narrative quest. And I will do QB stolen goods. And I can open it up. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give the quest name stolen goods, just put a space in it. And add a description just for anything else. Bob has had items stolen and wants you to find them. Perfect. So I come to the quest here, the quest start. So the quest started immediately to find the 3 items. So I'm going to complete the narrative data task because that's what we're doing. And the quest task will be a type of DT item pickup. And the argument is going to be stolen goods. And then the quantity is 3 because we know there's 3 of them. And the description override I will set to find the stolen goods. And once you've done it, I'll say I want to go back and talk to Bob. So I'm going to drag off and do play dialogue node. And then this is where after we've played it, we'll just complete it off like so. The description override, I will type bring the items back to Bob. So I'll compile and save that and I'll go back over to Bob's dialogue. So inside here, we've got the hi, someone stole from me last night. So I'm going to add a condition to this. Is quest started or finished? So have we done the quest in the past? I'm going to come down and tick the not option and I'm going to open up the quest and do stolen goods. So are we saying, have we done this quest before or have we never done it before? Then we'll run this. Oh, thank the heavens, I reward you handsomely. But I'll do this after he says. So when the player says, I will find your goods, the quest will pop up saying you've unlocked a new quest. So I'll begin quest on an event. I will do it at the end of the dialogue and I will say stolen goods. And then Bob will say, oh, thank the heavens, I will reward you. And now we can come back over to the other side here. And I can drag off and add a line for Bob saying, did you find I will do did you find all my items yet? And I'll add a condition to this one, which will be is quest in progress. So I'll say quest stolen goods. So is it in progress, do this one. But what I'll also do is add a condition to say, are they still waiting to find the items? So I'm going to copy quest state 1. And back in my dialog, I'm going to add a new condition of is quest at state. So I'm going to tick not and paste this state in there and assign it to the stolen goods quest. And this is basically going to say, if the quest is currently not at the state quest 1, which is where you actually need to talk to him, then it will take this path. So if you collect one item and go back to him, or you receive the quest and go back to him, then he's going to say, did you find all my item? And then just end the dialogue, which is fine. And then the third and final dialogue piece I'm going to add is one for Bob, where he says, you found all my items, thank the heavens, please take this as a reward. Where I will come back to this old one, and I'm actually just going to copy the is quest at state, and I'm just going to paste it on here, and then I'm going to untick the not. So if he is ready to hand the items back, then it will do it, and that should be it. So now I'm going to copy this ID of this final one, and I'm going to go back to the quest and say, this is how you complete it with Bob. Compile and save. And one thing I've just noticed is I need to come back. I actually named the item as Elixir 02, but I'm looking for stolen goods. So I think stolen goods is a better idea. So I'm actually going to come and copy the name of the stolen goods that I need to find. And I'm just going to Control Command B to find the stolen goods here. And I'm just going to replace the default value name with stolen goods like so. So if I hit compile and save, you should see now this all says stolen goods, which will mean the quest will now work. So now if we come and start the quest with Bob, you can see he says, we need to find someone stole my goods, please can you find them? I'll say, yeah, I'll find your goods. He says, thank heavens, I will reward you. So if I come around here and pick up the first elixir, then I come and pick up the second one. And of course you could customize the quest with proper waypoints and stuff to help the player out, because they're not going to explore this entire thing like that. Unless it's one of them quests that you run and you'll get to it eventually, but for now it's okay. So I can come and collect all 3 items, and then I can take a nice little shortcut this way just to go, oh no I can't. So I can take a nice little shortcut this way just to come and see Bob, and if I climb up here, there we are, so I can talk to Bob, and he says, you found all my items, thank heavens, please take this as a reward. Look at that, ladies and gentlemen, we now have a full quest. How cool is that? One last thing you might want to do to improve your character, if you want to hide this debug menu up here where you press tab to show it, you can get rid of it really easily by opening your ALS character and just deleting off the debug component. And you can see the debug component is now gone, it doesn't work. And you can't even hold Q to change your pose or anything. That debug component is solely there for you to edit your character and stuff like that. I'm personally going to keep it in just for now, but when you export the game you might want to get rid of it. But it gives you a good position to look and figure out what to do with all the ALS assets. So the last few things we're going to do on this game, because we now have a lot of the starting setup done, is 2 main things that not a lot of starting games go with, but it's really quick to add, and once you've got it, it's dead easy to do. So the first thing is a couple of intro screens, dead easy to sort out. So once you've installed the Async plugin, if we did at the beginning of the tutorial, you can go to Edit, Project Settings, and then you can come down to Async Loading Screen. So if you've seen my other tutorial, what's more in depth, it goes through this again, but all I'm going to do for mine is just come into Startup Loading Image Screen, and then I won't auto-complete when it completes, but I will make them skippable. And then for the movie paths, I need to actually insert the path to where I want the movies to be. So this is just going to be, when you first load the game, it shows whichever movies you want. So I'm going to come into my content folder here, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to do new folder, and I will just call it movies, so you can see it's here. Then I'm going to open this in my Explorer. Here we go. So I've got movies in my Explorer. And then the first movie I'm going to paste in is actually an older one. It's the Unreal Startup movie, because everybody wants that. It's this one here. It just says Unreal Engine, you know, shows the engine off. I think you technically have to get a license for it, but I'm not going to be doing anything. I'm not going to do anything with this game. And the next one I have is this intro, a very lovely friend of mine created for me. There we go. And I'll just call this Decryption Intro. There we go. And then all we do is back in here is we literally just paste the name of the movies like so. Just like that. And that's the intro movies done. So you could also optionally go onto the default loading screens. I'm just going to leave them as default for now just because I don't have any set up. But that's a really basic loading screen. And the next thing we're going to do is just set up a super basic main menu. I'm going to come in and press Control N to open a new one. I'm just going to go empty level because we don't need it to be anything special. And I'll click create. So here is our empty level. So this is what we're going to use to show the main menu. So I'm going to Control S to save, and I'll call this main menu, just like that. Next, we actually need to create the main menu. So I'm going to create a new UI folder in my content drawer. And then I'm going to simply create a user interface widget blueprint. I will set it as a type of user widget, and I'll call it WB main menu. Inside here, I'm just going to add a canvas panel, and then I will also add a vertical box. Inside the vertical box, I'm going to add a button, which will be our play game button, and then some text, which will actually be the text saying play game. There we go. So this button I'm going to rename to BTN play game, and this text I'm going to set to play game. We're on a black background, so what I'm going to do is come back to the button, and I'm going to set the style for the normal to be none. For the hovered, I'm going to keep it as a box, but I'm going to reduce the opacity quite a lot. So I'll say to just 0.2, because this is a super basic main menu. For the pressed, I'm going to, just to indicate that you've actually pressed it, I'll set it to 0.4, so it's a little bit darker. And then for the disabled, we're not going to be using, so I can ignore. I'm going to go back to the text and just make sure it's set to take up. I'm going to set the size to content on the vertical box, and then I'm just going to hold Control or Command Shift and put it in the middle, just like so. So it says play game. Now, if I click on the button and scroll down to the very bottom, I can add a on clicked event, and then I can delete the 3 events up there because we don't need them. And on here, all I'm going to do is call open level by object reference, and the object reference will be our level 01, just like that. So now if I come back to my main menu here, I need to create a basic player controller that will handle everything in this scene. So I'm going to come back to my blueprints here, and I'm going to create a new folder called controllers, and I'm going to right click blueprint class, and I'm going to create a new player controller called BP player controller main menu, and I'm going to open this up. So all this is going to do for me is on the event begin, I'm just going to create a widget, and it'll be a type of our main menu, and the add return value I will just do add to viewport because we don't need to store it or do anything with it. And the next thing we need to do after we've got a controller is we need to add a new game mode for it, so it just handles the controller, it doesn't need to do anything else. So I'll just come up and create a new folder, and I'll call it game modes, and then I will call it add a new blueprint class type of game mode, and I will call it GM underscore main menu, and I will open this up. Now inside the player controller, I will set it to our main menu player controller. For the pawn, I'm just going to set it to none because we don't want one. So if we compile and save now, and in our main menu, come to world settings, I can set the game mode override to our game mode main menu. If I play it, we now see the play button. I can hover over it. If I click it, the game will freeze and it'll take me into it. However, because we've got the async loading screen in, it won't actually freeze. When you've actually exported the game, it will show the loading screen if you've got one set up. There we go, and we're in the game, and we can run around and do everything we need. The final thing we're going to do for the main menu is just go to Edit, Project Settings, and on Maps and Modes, here on Game Default Map, we're going to change that to our main menu. This just means when you export the build, the first level you will see is the main menu. How cool is that, ladies and gentlemen? We now have a fully fledged starter project. We've done everything from creating the solution from scratch, importing the Synty assets and upgrading it to 5.3. We've imported plugins for ALS, Community, Narrative and Async Loading Screen. We've set up ALS, rebound Synty to it, set the NPCs up, set the interaction interface up, the dialogue, the quest, a main menu and the loading screen. Everything is slam packed into this tutorial. It is quickly browsed over it all, but if you've used it all before, this is a good solid foundation to get you going. And I think we're in a really good position to carry on and do some awesome stuff in the future tutorials. So what do you think, ladies and gentlemen? Have you missed anything from the tutorial you would have added? Do you think these tutorials should be longer or shorter in future? How has your year been in 2023? Do you have any resolutions for 2024? Let me know below. My name's Decryption. I hope you have a fantastic holiday and amazing new year, and I will see you next time.